The 2025 SEC schedule was released yesterday. We now know all 12 opponents that Texas will face going into their second year in the conference.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at NissanUSA.com. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we are discussing the 2025 schedule. We now know all 12 opponents that Texas will face in the regular season in 2025. Texas held their pro days yesterday, and our future NFL players got another chance to showcase their skill sets in front of over 90 NFL executives, which is just amazing to see at the 40 acres. Then our Texas baseball team following up a walk-off, right, on where we are Thursday, on Tuesday night, right? They got a huge win over Air Force last night, right, to get the midweek sweep ahead of a weekend series against Baylor. And March Madness starts today for the Texas Longhorns, the 7th seed. They will face off against Colorado State in the 7-10 matchup later today. We discuss all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we're talking about the 2025 schedule first, and I was under the impression that they would revisit the 9-game conference schedule going into the 2025 season, but maybe they meant following the 2025 season, or maybe I just don't remember what I read. But when you look at it, the SEC schedule is still 8 conference games, right? And then 1 game required against a power conference team or independent. That's the format heading into the 2025 season. And of course, Texas will be playing Ohio State. So that's going to be their 1 game against a power conference team, and then their 8 SEC, conference games. So same format that it is in 2024 in 2025. And I wonder if they'll revisit it going into 2026 and 2027, because we know that, an extra SEC game, will definitely provide a lot of revenue to the conference. The Longhorns have the same conference opponents that they do in 2024, with the locations flipped outside of Oklahoma. Obviously, that game will be in the Cotton Bowl for the foreseeable future. And based on this scheduling, right, because I thought that our opponents would flip, like we would play the conference opponents in 2025 that Oklahoma played in 2024. But I see that that's not the case, because we have the same conference opponents. So based on the way that they scheduled it, right, basically giving, Texas and these teams a home and home in their conference, it's reasonable to believe that in 2026 and 2027, Texas will be playing some combination of LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, South Carolina, or Auburn, depending on the number of conference games, right? So we don't play any of those teams in our first 2 years in the conference, but I think in our 3rd and 4th years, those will primarily be the teams we're playing. And then the teams we're playing now, like Kentucky, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, we probably won't play them again until the 2028 season, right? So when you look at it in the non-conference, Texas will open up the season at Ohio State, right? I think, knock on wood, that should be Arch Manning's first start. Or hopefully he doesn't have to go in and start this year. Hopefully Quinn Ewers can start every game. Then you'll come back home and play San Jose State. You'll play UTEP at home, and then you'll play Sam Houston State at home before you get into the conference schedule. In 2025, you'll have Arkansas and Texas A&M at home in your first season in the SEC. You have to go on the road and face those teams in tough road environments, but you will get them at home in your second year in the conference. You will play Florida on the road. You'll play Georgia on the road. You get those 2 teams at home in 2024. You'll have to go on the road to face those teams. I think Georgia will still be one of the premier teams in college football in 2025 when you face them on the road. And I think Florida will be a lot better in 2025 than they will be in 2024. So I think that'll be a semi-tough game for the Longhorns. And, I think the Swamp is still a tough environment, regardless of how the Florida football team is playing. And you'll play Mississippi State on the road, Kentucky on the road. When I look at their 2-year outlook, I'm just not sure that those will be programs that in the 2 years, of course, anything can happen, but pose a serious threat to the Longhorns. Maybe, Jeff Lebby can do some really good things, get a really good quarterback in there, and, they can get hot at Mississippi State. Kentucky, Mark Stoops is a good coach, but, I just think Mississippi State and Kentucky over the next few years, they don't really pose a threat to the Longhorns. Not Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, Of course not, anything could happen in the Arkansas and Texas A&M game, but it really looks like in 2025, Texas has a favorable, conference schedule and just schedule overall, outside of Ohio State in the non-conference. And then, of course, you'll play Oklahoma in a neutral site, and anything can happen in that game as well. So, when the 2025 schedule came out, my initial thought was disappointment. Like, damn, we're playing the same teams. I wanted to rotate and play LSU, Alabama, whoever. But I think this is a really favorable schedule for a 2025 Texas team that may be even better than they were in 2024. And I also, was kind of ready to move into the 9-game conference schedule. But when Texas is playing Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan, and Ohio State, that's essentially 9 conference games, right? And so that gives you the opportunity outside of that to still schedule 3 non-conference games and still play against teams in the state of Texas, right? I've already had conversations with some of my Sam Houston friends, or friends that went to Sam Houston about going to that game in 2025. So I really like the format that we have now, especially if Texas is going to schedule a blue blood in the non-conference. It gives Texas fans 9 solid games every year, no matter what, either conference games or an out-of-conference game to be invested in the season. So really favorable schedule, I think, for the Texas Longhorns, especially for a team that may be even better in 2025 than they are in 2024. When you look at the pro day yesterday, that's what I'm moving into next. Texas held their pro day, and it was reported that 96 scouts and 3 head coaches were in attendance, which is crazy, but could certainly turn into the norm, right? You would expect next year a similar amount of NFL personnel would show up to see a group headlined by Quinn Ewers, Kelvin Banks, and Isaiah Bond. And I'm sure next year we'll be looking at 6, 7 plus Longhorns being eligible for the NFL draft and being serious considerations for the NFL draft, right? With all the talent on this football team and the way that they're producing and developing at the University of Texas. From what I saw of the pro day, there wasn't a ton of coverage, right, in terms of us being able to see the whole thing compared to like a USC, where it felt like the whole world was there in terms of the media and everything. But we were able to see clips, and Longhorn Network did post some type of recap, but it wasn't what we were expecting. But we Twitter, social media, and just reports and all of that, you're able to get a glimpse of what happened at pro day. And from what I saw, video and just different people's accounts, Xavier Worthy did a really good job of showcasing his hands, right? His fluidity in and out of his breaks and his overall route running ability. And obviously his speed wasn't a question at all, running a 4.2 140. But I think that sometimes when you run that fast, it almost can be a detriment because it puts that narrative on you, right? That, oh, he's just a speed receiver, right? And I think Xavier Worthy did a really good job of proving at his pro day. He already showed it on tape, but, continuing to prove at his pro day that he's not just a speed receiver. He can be a complete receiver in the National Football League. And with that speed, no doubt he's a top 32 pick. Adonai Mitchell, to me, has all the tools to be a number 1 wide receiver in the National Football League. And he continued to show that at his pro day, right? He had an exceptional combine. They're running a 4.34, right? Coming in at 6'2", 208 pounds. And at his pro day, he caught everything coming his way, especially going all out for a deep ball where he had to fall to the ground and catch it, but showed his superstar ability to track and catch the ball down the field. So all the buzz right now is that Adonai Mitchell will be a first-round pick. And to me, he looks like a bona fide number 1 wide receiver at the next level in the National Football League. Byron Murphy looked very explosive at 295 pounds and looks like a lock to go top 20 in the NFL draft coming up in April. T'Vondre Sweat showed really good change of direction and motor at 362 pounds. I think he had a strong day. Quinn Ewers isn't in this draft class, but he absolutely was being scouted yesterday. And from all accounts, he was very impressive. He threw 2 really good deep balls that I saw to Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, 50 plus yards down the field. Keelan Robinson, right, putting up 20 reps on the bench press at the running back position. That was really impressive. We know Keelan Robinson is just a gritty football player, right? Whatever you need him to do, he's going to do it. Whatever role he was asked to be in at the University of Texas, he did it without complaint. So Keelan Robinson, absolutely one of my favorite players to ever come through the 40. And him putting up 20 reps on the bench press is huge at a pro day. I really think that could end up landing him an opportunity somewhere. I'm still not sure that he gets drafted, but 20 reps as a running back is significant, right? At the pro day, for sure. I know that impressed some people. And then Jatavian Sanders. We have to talk about Jatavian Sanders. So he ran his first 40-yard dash at 4.74, which was alarming at the NFL Combine. He was able to get it down a little bit at the Combine with the second attempt with the 4.69. But he plays at the tight end position, right? He plays on the line of scrimmage, and he's going to be blocking a lot in the National Football League. So the bench press would be an important metric to see how you can hold up at the line of scrimmage. And I just talked about Keelan Robinson, who is under 6 foot, putting up 20 reps on the bench press. They do say having shorter arms helps you in the bench press, though. I wouldn't know, But Jatavian Sanders at the tight end position at 245 pounds only was able to rep 8 times at 225 at his pro day. So when you're looking at a player who was coming into the draft process as the number 2 tight end, as somebody who's talked about as maybe being a fringe first round pick, a lock to go in the second round, especially a lock to go in the top 45 picks, and being, that modern tight end that can cause so many mismatches at the NFL level, I still think that's true, but I don't think he's done himself any favors this offseason, right? And, I'm not sure if it's something going on with him, and, if he just hasn't trained as hard, as he needed to, if he hasn't focused as hard as he's needed to be focused. But a 4.74 in the 40, then a 4.69 in the 40, and then 8 reps on the bench press at the pro day, those are not good numbers at all for Jatavian Sanders. Outside of that, though, the rest of the players definitely shined at the pro day. And I think pretty much everybody in, that represented Texas at the pro day improved their draft stock in some shape, form, or fashion, maybe outside of Jatavian Sanders. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into the Texas baseball team, who got a huge midweek sweep of Air Force heading into a conference series against the Baylor Bears. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Fire TV. And Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, Major League Baseball, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. They being the Texas Longhorns, men or women, I don't care. Just give me one of them. All right, so we're talking about the Texas baseball team, and after, their miraculous walk-off win on Tuesday night, right, where they were down 5-3 in the bottom of the ninth, we said that, or I said on the podcast, but a lot of people said on social media that could be the type of game that could propel this, baseball team throughout the rest of the season, right? That could be the game that we look back and say this was the turning point for the Texas Longhorns, and certainly they would have a lot of momentum after that game. And if I was to bet on college baseball, right, which is sick, right? But if I was to bet on college baseball, I would have went and put everything I own on Texas smashing Air Force in this second game, right? Like, there's just no way that you can bounce back from being demoralized like that in the first game of the series, right? Going into the ninth inning with a 5-3 lead and then losing, right? Like, I just knew that the next day Air Force was going to come out flat. And although they took, the lead, scored the first run, they came out flat, and Texas put it on them pretty bad. So Texas is now 13-8 after a 2-game sweep of Air Force at the Dish. And they beat them 12-3 last night, right? To take the 2-game series over Air Force. So Air Force took a 1-0 lead in the second inning after a walk and 2 singles in the inning. Once again, that theme of the other team jumping out to an early lead, even though this time it was in the second inning, but, that continues to be a theme. And, our bats kind of have to be resilient and play from behind, even though it's only 1-0. I'm probably being a little bit dramatic, but, I do think there is that mental aspect to baseball. When you're up there hitting, it's already hard enough. Now you have to kind of press, right, because you're losing. But, our bats did a really good job of they've done a really good job of being resilient all season. And of course, in this game, they did the same thing. So Air Force once again took a 1-0 lead in the second after a walk and 2 singles in the inning. But Texas would respond immediately in the bottom of the second, scoring 4 runs due to 3 hits and 2 walks in the inning. 2 of the runs, right, 2 of the 4 came on a wild pitch and pass ball. So Texas just continues to find really creative ways to score. And, it just shows, how things like that can turn the game, right? Defense, wild pitching, errors, it's all important in baseball, right? It's not just hitting and pitching. Max Bellew made it 5-1 in the third inning with the right field homer before Air Force would get 2 runs back in the 5th and the 6th on an RBI single and solo homer to make the score 5-3, Texas with the advantage. But Texas would break the floodgates in the 7th, scoring 7 runs to make it 12-3, which was the final score. In this inning, the first 9 hitters reached base on 8 hits and a walk, right? So they batted around without recording an out, which is absolutely insane, right? 8 hits and a walk. The first 9 batters that went to the plate, that was the result. In that inning alone, you had 2 doubles and 2 home runs. Texas has had games this year. I shouldn't even say that because I didn't look, right? There's teams this year, right, that have had games where they didn't even have 4 extra base hits in a game, right? And Texas just did it in the inning. So that just shows you how crazy that these bats can be, when they're at their best. So they blitzed Air Force 12-3 after walking it off against them on Tuesday night, and a huge 2-game mid-sweep for this Texas baseball team that had been playing very inconsistent up until that point. And now they play a weekend series against Baylor at home this weekend. I think it's a must-series win or sweep. You either have to take 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3, right? You cannot go back to the inconsistent Texas baseball team that loses this series to a Baylor team that is not better than them and goes out there and is getting a bunch of errors, base running errors, and pitching errors, and the bats don't show up and things like that, right? Like we've seen over these 2 games how good this Texas baseball team can be, albeit against Air Force, right? And they need to carry that momentum into this weekend series against Baylor and play Texas Longhorns baseball and take 2 out of 3 or sweep the Baylor Bears this weekend. A quick word from our sponsors and the 5 keys for Texas Longhorns basketball, the men, to make it to the round of 32 and possibly face off against Rick Barnes and the Tennessee Volunteers. Ooh, hold on. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. I want to give a quick shout-out to the Grambling Tigers. All right, I am a HBCU graduate. I went to Texas Southern University in Houston, and Grambling is a HBCU as well, and they made their first NCAA tournament appearance, right, knocking out my Texas Southern University Tigers in the SWAC tournament, but they made their first NCAA tournament appearance, and they won their first NCAA tournament game. So they have the pleasure of getting to play against Purdue. They'll probably lose to Purdue by a whole lot, but their season has already been a success, right? Winning that play-in game and getting into the actual NCAA tournament and being able to play a 1 seed. So huge win for Grambling and their program, and it's always good to see the SWAC represented in the NCAA tournament, as I am a graduate of the SWAC and a graduate of an HBCU. So good to see another HBCU getting some shine and getting to play on the national stage, albeit against a Purdue team that's about to work them out, right? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, we're getting out of here talking about the 5 keys for Texas to advance to the round of 32 and, give the committee what they want, that juicy matchup against Rick Barnes and the Tennessee Volunteers in the second round. So they play Colorado State today. Colorado State played on Tuesday night against Virginia. They played in the night game in Dayton, Ohio. They won that game, right? Virginia didn't even really show up, right? But Colorado State won that game and then had to travel to North Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina, to play a game that will tip less than 48 hours from the end of their last game, right? So hopefully that'll play a factor, right? There'll probably be some tired legs going against the Texas Longhorns, and I think the Texas Longhorns need to take advantage of that, right? This obviously would be a very bad loss to lose to Colorado State, but I think they need to come on them. It's March Madness. Anything can happen in a 1-game, scenario. So I think they need to come out, jump on them early, and let them know who they're playing with, right? And let them know that, okay, you had a nice win against Virginia, but the road stops here, right? So my 5 keys to Texas advancing to the round of 32 is guard play wins in March, right? And tonight's game, Max Asmus and Tyrese Hunter need to be excellent. I wish I could, tell you what Tyrese Hunter looking excellent, or I mean, being excellent looks like. I think it looks different every game, right? One game it's him scoring 20. One game it's his effort on the defensive end. One game it's his assist and rebounding. So I really don't know what Tyrese Hunter looking excellent, or being excellent will look like tonight. I just know he needs to be excellent, right? In whatever way he decides to be excellent tonight. Hopefully it's scoring a bunch of points. Hopefully it's being really good on the defensive end. But he just needs to show up tonight and be really good at the guard position. And obviously, Max Asmus, his role on this basketball team is to score. He needs to score tonight against Colorado State. And I think Kendall Weaver and IT Horton need to make winning basketball plays in their minutes. Not sure how much of a role they'll play tonight. Obviously, Kendall Weaver will be out there with his defense. Not sure how much of a role IT Horton will play, but, he needs to score, right? We need his scoring, and they need to make winning basketball plays in their minutes on both sides of the ball, offensive and defensive. Dylan Dessou needs to score and stay on the floor. I smiled when I wrote that because I wasn't even trying to rhyme, but it did rhyme. But seriously, Dylan Dessou, he has to, for this Texas basketball team to play Texas Longhorns basketball, Dylan Dessou has to give us the 16, 17 plus that we're accustomed to getting from him. But he also has to stay on the court, right? Texas, one of the big reasons they lost to Kansas State is because, Dylan Dessou had 4 fouls with like 11 minutes to go in the game, and so you had to take him out so much, and he just really wasn't a factor. This game will get really interesting against Colorado State if Dylan Dessou is on the bench in foul trouble, right? So he needs to be smart about how he defends. He needs to find a way to stay on the floor, and he needs to score at a high level for this Texas basketball team and take pressure off of everybody else. Because when Dylan Dessou is scoring, it takes pressure off of everybody else. Easy buckets for Dylan Mitchell will open up this offense. I think they've done a really good job. Rodney Terry, right? He's done a really good job of creating open opportunities for Dylan Mitchell, especially early in the game, to get him active and take pressure off of everybody else in the offense. What we've been seeing a lot is, Max Asmus and Dylan Mitchell and that high ball screen. And then Max Asmus comes off that ball screen. Usually 2 defenders are going to come with Max because he's the shooter. And then you see Dylan Mitchell rolling to the basket for easy buckets. We've seen that. We've seen Dylan Mitchell and Max Asmus kind of running that handoff action, where he can either hand off the ball to Max Asmus or he can fake it and take it himself to the lane for a dunk. And we've also seen a play that the Warriors run a lot where Max Asmus and Dylan Dessou come off that high ball screen. And then Max Asmus, usually 2 defenders come with him because of his 3-point shooting ability. He can dump it off to Dylan Dessou in the middle of the floor. And then Dylan Dessou has the option to either charge the basket, shoot the floater himself, or Dylan Mitchell usually is cutting from the 3-point line at the same time that pass is made to Dylan Dessou. So while Dylan Mitchell is cutting, Dylan Dessou now has the decision to either take it himself, shoot the floater, or kick it to Dylan Mitchell cutting from the 3-point line for an easy dunk. And you see that play with the Warriors a lot with Steph Curry and Draymond Green in that high ball screen. You get the ball to Draymond Green in the middle of the floor, and he has the option to score himself, drive downhill, shoot the floater, or kick it to Andrew Wiggins or Jonathan Kuminga coming from the 3-point line for an easy dunk or layup. So, that's for the Rodney Terry doesn't do anything crowd. I just told you, 3 different plays schematically that we've been using, plays that are used in the National Basketball Association that we've been using to get Dylan Mitchell easy baskets. And we need to continue to do that in the NCAA tournament. Just a little X and O talk for you, for the people that says Rodney Terry doesn't know how to coach. Just giving you some examples, right? Take pressure off of yourself and make open shots, right? Make the 3, defend the 3. You're now in a scenario where one game could send you home, right? And because of the volatility of the 3-point shot, anybody can win a game where they make their 3s and you don't, right? If Colorado State comes out tonight and makes 18 3s and Texas makes 3, we're going to lose that game, even though we're the better team, right? And so in a 1-game scenario, the 3-point shot can change everything because of its volatility. So you're going to have to make the open shots when you get them. Don't make it harder on yourself. But to win this game, make the 3 and defend the 3, because of the 3-point shot, right? We're seeing a lot more upsets, and any game can be in the balance, right? And any game, even if Texas is the better team, can swing simply on them making a lot more 3s than we do. So make the 3, defend the 3. Texas is the better team. They should win. And sit in the chair and dominate them defensively for 40 minutes, right? Work the game for 40 minutes, not for 38, not for 37, not for 32, not for 28. Sit in the chair, defend at a high level for 40 minutes, and go out there and beat a team that you should beat that just played a game less than 48 hours ago to move to the round of 32. And then we're going to knock off the Tennessee Volunteers and get to our 2nd consecutive Sweet 16. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.